Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Devin Shanahan Show. Got not too much news to talk about today. Got a few things. I'm going to talk about the Supreme Court case that Texas filed and 17 to 20 other states signed on to. I'm not sure the exact number. It was 17 sometime late yesterday, and it may have turned to 18, 19, or 20. But I'm going to talk about that. The Supreme Court just essentially rejected that case earlier Friday. Going to talk a little bit about, some of the remarks the Texas head of the Texas GOP RNC essentially came out and said in response to this Supreme Court rejecting this case. And we're going to talk a little bit about the news that has been confirmed by Hunter Biden himself that he is under investigation and has been under investigation since 2018, and what that means and what we can maybe see from that, should Biden take office in January, which it looks like he will. So let's jump right in. Excuse me. We've got an article here from CNN Politics. Supreme Court rejects Texas's and Trump's bid to overturn election. The Supreme Court on Friday rejected a bid from Texas Attorney General, supported by President Donald Trump, to block the ballots of millions of voters in battleground states that went in favor of President-elect Joe Biden. The court's order, issued with no public dissents, to dismiss the challenge is the strongest indication yet that Trump has no chance of overturning election results in court, and that even the justices whom he placed there have no interest in allowing his desperate legal bids to continue. We're going to stop. I mean, come on, it's CNN. I picked a CNN article. Of course, we're going to have to stop a lot and correct their nonsense. You can tell something is very opinionated when they say things like, to dismiss the challenge is the strongest indication yet that Trump has no chance of overturning election results in court, and that even justices whom he placed there have no interest in allowing his desperate legal bids to continue. That line right there just shows what the left thinks of the Supreme Court. They think that like Trump put these justices there just to do his bidding and essentially put conservative values in place and be a political wing of the Trump politics or the Republican Party. That's what they think. I mean, They said it right there, and that even the justices whom he placed there have no interest in allowing his desperate legal bids to continue. I mean, it doesn't matter what their interest is. It doesn't matter who put the justices there. The justices are there to interpret the Constitution. That's what they should be doing. They should be reading the Constitution, interpreting it, what it meant at the time it was written, not what it means now to some leftist crazy people who decide for some reason. The Constitution is not a living document. It does not morph. It's not morph over time. Sure, you can change it. There's a process for changing it. You can set precedent on ruling that can have effects in how the Constitution is interpreted later on. But in terms of like what a justice should be doing, their job is to interpret the Constitution. It's not to do the bidding of the president who put them there. And you can see this clearly right here, that this is what the left thinks. It comes out in this small little paragraph right here by CNN. But let's go on. Don't want to get off topic. The Electoral College will convene Monday to affirm Biden's win. The lawsuit, brought by Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, a staunch Trump ally, sought to sue Pennsylvania, Michigan, Georgia, and Wisconsin, which all went for Biden, and invalidate all their election results. And this week, with his options narrowing, Trump, accompanied by the support of several Republican attorney generals and GOP lawmakers, cranked up pressure to have the Supreme Court weigh in. Quote, "From a legal perspective, the flat lady has sung," said Steve Vlaudek, a CNN Supreme Court analyst and University of Texas law professor. Trump and his legal team, hamstrung by a series of coronavirus diagnoses among lawyers who had traveled across the country advocating on behalf of Trump's case, have for weeks pushed increasingly desperate appeals and baseless conspiracy theories about his second term being stolen. Quote, "The Supreme Court really let us down. No wisdom, no courage," Trump tweeted around midnight. Mike Gwynn, a spokesman for Biden's campaign, said the decision was, quote, "no surprise." Paxton, calling the court's order, quote, "unfortunate," vowed to fight. Quote, "I will continue to tirelessly defend the integrity and security of our elections and hold accountable those who shirk established election law for their own convenience," he said in a statement. Republican Republican election lawyer Ben Ginsburg said Trump's crusade to undermine the election results through rhetoric and court challenges, quote, put a huge stress test on our democracy. Quote, the Republicans who did follow Donald Trump really have an obligation now to make the country strong again, to heal the chinks that Donald Trump tried to put in the foundation of the country and democracy, Ginsburg told CNN's Wolf Blitzer, The Situation Room. First of all, if you're on Wolf Blitzer, you're not a Republican. End of story. You're a rhino. Republican in name only. You're not an actual Republican. You're not an actual conservative, okay? Just want to put that out there. Second, this did not put a huge stress test on our democracy. You know, you got the left, you got them out there, you got these Democratic politicians, you got the mainstream media, which is just an arm of the Democratic Party at this point. You got them out there saying things like, oh, you know, how can all these Trump supporters be in favor of Donald Trump, you know, ruining our democracy and putting everything that we've worked for our democracy at stake by challenging the results of the election. They act like it's some sort of coup that he's trying to do, or some sort of illegal or, you know, under the law, or some sort of sketchy thing he's trying to do. No, by definition, what Donald Trump is doing is legal. He is following a legal process. He is filing lawsuits. That is, by definition, a legal thing to do and the proper way to handle any challenge you may have with an election. You know, we can argue whether or not there is evidence to support these cases or whether or not these cases should be taken up in the court. We can argue that. That's perfectly up for debate. But what is not up for debate is that lawsuits are somehow a coup, or that lawsuits are somehow destroying the foundations of our democracy and the foundations of our electoral system in our country. That is not up for debate. By definition, lawsuits are going through the legal process, which is the correct process in this country, that you want to challenge something like an election. You know, that's it. The media just doesn't want to cover it. And it's just pure propaganda. Like I said, we can debate the cases. We can debate the actual cases. We can debate the actual evidence. You know, some of the evidence I think is very strong. Some of the evidence I think is very weak and very circumstantial. Of course, there was election fraud. I would bet a lot of money that there was more election fraud in this election than any election ever in the United States. Solely based on the fact that more people voted in this election than any election ever in the United States. There's always fraud in every election. There's always fraud. There were certainly a large number of irregularities or abnormalities, you know, videos of weird things kind of happening. You know, we had the vote count stop in a lot of states on election night. Stopped for a while, then a bunch of Biden votes came in. You know, these things are weird. These things are abnormal. They could have a perfectly reasonable explanation. They could have a perfectly innocent explanation. But, you know, when you pair all these things together, the statistical abnormalities, you know, all the states that are usually this, I forget what the term it's for, but states, bellwether states. A bellwether state is a state that, you know, it can usually, if they vote Democrat, usually the president, they win the presidency, right? Or if they vote Republican, usually the Republican candidate wins the presidency. All these bellwether states and bellwether counties that have long-standing histories of voting with the winner. You know, there's a lot of those didn't happen. You know, you have the Trump vote, you know, picking up large Latino populations in Texas and Florida. You have him picking up large African-American support in areas. You know, you have Joe Biden winning the lowest number of counties, lowest percentage of counties almost ever, and still winning. You have the fact that Donald Trump won the most votes ever of an incumbent president and still lost. You know, even Obama got less votes in 2016 than he did in 2012. 3 million less votes, and he won. Joe Biden comes out, and he got like 10 million more votes or something insane like that. It's like 7 to 10 million more votes than Barack Obama did, who is arguably one of the most popular presidents that we've had in the past. He drew a vast quantity of support amongst all people. I mean, you know, all those things added up together can point to, you know, it can make it look like there's a lot of mishandling of election stuff. It could make it look like there's a lot of fraud, but there could be an innocent explanation, like I said. It could just be the appearance of fraud. But these things need to be investigated. Like I said, we have to have transparency. It is the minimum requirement for people to trust in our democracy, is that we have a transparent system. That's why I argue for voter ID and all that kind of stuff. A voter ID, we need to vote in person, except for circumstances where it is not possible. None of those things happened in this election. So, but yeah, we can investigate these things. We can file lawsuits to figure out what happened, like the Donald Trump campaign has been doing and some of the other states have been doing. And we're going to talk more about the Texas case here in a second, and why I think it was denied and why I think it was actually a good thing that it was denied. But, I mean, to say that we're undermining democracy by filing lawsuits and wanting investigations and going through the legal process that this country has set forth to challenge an election, to say that it's undermining democracy is factually inaccurate, and you are lying to the American people. And that's what the media is doing. But as we know, the media is just a political arm, political wing of the Democratic Party. Let's talk a little bit about why I think that this case was denied. This Texas case was denied by the Supreme Court. And, it kind of says it right here. I highlighted for you guys. Texas denied for lack of standing. Okay, so I saw this coming, So here, I'm going to give a little background, and so everyone understands what the case was actually about. Then I'm going to talk about why it was denied for standing and why I think it was a good thing it was denied for standing and not a surprise. So, I'm not going to read the CNN article. They're full of it. Okay, they're absolutely full of it. They probably don't know what they're talking about. I know what I'm talking about. I'm not a lawyer, but I've read a lot about it. I've looked into it, and it's a pretty basic thing. You don't have to be a lawyer to understand this. Okay, so the Texas case was essentially saying that because these swing states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Georgia, and Wisconsin, violated Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the Constitution, which says that the state legislatures make voting laws, essentially. That's what it says. Because they violated that, because those swing states violated that, and they created their own voting rules, essentially. They passed like executive orders, like the governors would step in and pass a rule saying we don't have to verify signatures, we can accept mail-in ballots late, or we can have widespread mail-in voting, even though the state law says that there has to be a good reason for mail-in voting. Because they did that without the state legislature actually passing those laws, they violated the Constitution. And a lot of these rules are unconstitutional. And I would agree with that. I think that if you remove all the ballots from these swing states that were passed under unconstitutional voting laws, I think that Donald Trump would win the election. I do. But that's an argument for a different day. And I wouldn't call that fraud necessarily. Not in the traditional sense that you're hearing Donald Trump say it. But Texas is filing and saying that since these states did not follow the Constitution, it gave them an unfair advantage in the electoral process. And Texas is claiming that affects Texas because now Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, these states that didn't follow the Constitution have an advantage and are going to essentially be represented in an advantageous way in the electoral process. Like their pick for who becomes president, their electoral votes were selected unconstitutionally. Versus all the other states, like Texas, who had to play by the rules, they're at a disadvantage for having to play by the rules, when these other states didn't have to. And on the surface, that claim looks pretty good, right? Sounds pretty, okay, yeah, I can see that. And I can see that too. I can see that. Before I did any research on this, I was like, okay, that claim makes sense. And since it's a state suing other states, obviously it can skip the appellate process and has to go straight to the Supreme Court, right? So it's like, okay, this has to go straight to the Supreme Court. We might get an actual case here. We might get an actual ruling or something like that, right? But first of all, Texas was not actually filing this case yet. What they were doing was essentially they were filing for permission to file the case, is what they were doing. So they got denied. So the case never actually happened, but they were going to file a case, obviously, if they were given permission. But I'm going to explain to you why this Texas case now is not valid and doesn't have standing. Standing in law means that you have to prove that you are you have to be the harmed party. You have to be an injured party. There has to be an injury to you. For example, if you get hit by a bus, or if you get hit by a drunk driver, I cannot sue the drunk driver. You have to sue the drunk driver. I was not the injured party. I cannot sue on your behalf. You have to do it. I was unaffected. I don't have any standing in that case, right? That's what standing is. And the reason that Texas has no standing in this case, it has weak standing, a very weak argument for standing. And the reason that I believe that this is good, that it was denied, is because essentially they are trying to get the federal government, the Supreme Court, to step in and say that this law that these other states passed somehow, because it somehow affects Texas, that these state laws should be overturned. And that is such a weak argument for standing, because if they ruled that this case was allowed, let's say the Supreme Court ruled that the case was allowed, and this will make my point very clear. If they allowed this case, and if they allowed Texas to have standing in this case, it would set one of the worst federal judicial Supreme Court precedents we've ever seen in the history of this country, and it would put enormous power into the hands of the federal government and the Supreme Court, because what that would mean is that a state could sue another state over any law that that state has ever passed that affects the other state. So what I mean by that is California could sue Alabama for Alabama's abortion law. And their reasoning could be this, something like this. Well, Alabama doesn't let people have abortions, have easy access to abortions. And those people are flying to California to get abortions. And that affects us. So we want you to strike down their abortion laws. We want the Supreme Court, California, want the Supreme Court to strike down the abortion laws in Alabama because it affects us, because those people are coming here. And based on the precedent set in what would have been this case, if it were allowed, that would be acceptable. And that's bad, because as you can see, you cannot just have states suing other states for laws that these states have passed on their own within those states that have no effect on this state. You cannot have Texas suing Pennsylvania because Pennsylvania passed a law or a rule or an executive order or whatever it may be. They cannot sue them for these other laws. This is federalism. This is this is a foundational part of federalism, of separation between the states, separation between the federal government and the states, and each state has the right to do what they want to do. Now, the fact that these Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, all these states passed unconstitutional voting laws, yes, that is still true. But Texas was not the injured party. Texas has no standing. That's why this case was denied. And if it wasn't denied, like I said, it would set a terrible precedent. So I'm glad that it has been denied. I'm glad that it has been denied. And if you are a true conservative, you should also be glad that it has been denied. There are other cases that should be filed, and they should be filed at the state level in these swing states, saying that Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 was violated. The injured party from that would be a voter in one of those states. If I voted in Pennsylvania, I could claim that because of these other laws, because of these unconstitutional laws, I was disenfranchised. For example, in states that got rid of signature verification, or here's a better example. Some states had ballot curing. Michigan is one of these states. In Detroit, for example. Detroit, if you filled out your ballot incorrectly, instead of tossing it, instead of throwing it away and not counting it like they should have done, they would call the person who mailed them the ballot, and they would give them a chance to fix their ballot. This was only done in places like Detroit and very blue districts. If you did this in a red district, maybe you did this in a rural county, they wouldn't call you. They stuck to the letter of the law in these counties. They wouldn't call you and would not allow you to correct your ballot. That disenfranchises you as a voter if you're voting in one of those red states or red areas, because you don't get the chance to fix your vote. That is a privilege that was afforded to people in Detroit and blue areas and not other places. So if you were in one of those other places, you could sue. And you could say, I was injured because my vote was disenfranchised by all these other people who were voting under different rules and giving more opportunities to change their vote, et cetera, et cetera. You see what I'm saying? You see where I'm going? My audience is intelligent. I know they are. They're very intelligent. And they see where I'm going with these things. And I don't need to ramble anymore on it. But you guys see what I'm saying, right? You have to have an injured party, and this is why Texas was denied for standing. They had no standing, and it's good. And like I said, on the surface, when you first think about it, you go, what the heck, man? This Texas case was good. It sounds right. Then when you actually think about it, you think about the standing argument and what I just said, it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense, and it was doomed from the beginning, right? It was a publicity stunt, in my opinion, by the Texas Attorney General. Let's go on. Got a few more things to cover here, and I want to get through them all. So, article here from the Daily Wire. Texas GOP, perhaps law-abiding states should, quote, form a union that will abide by the Constitution in reaction to the Supreme Court dismissing a lawsuit from Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton to overturn presidential election results in 4 states. The state's Republican Party chairman, Alan West, posed, quote, perhaps law-abiding states should bond together and form a union of states that will abide by the Constitution. Quote, the Supreme Court, in tossing the Texas lawsuit that was joined by 17 states and 106 U.S. congressmen, has decreed that a state can take unconstitutional actions and violate its own election law, West said in a press release published Friday, quote, resulting in damaging effects on other states that abide by the law, while the guilty state suffers no consequences. The SCOTUS decision, quote, establishes a precedent that says states can violate the U.S. Constitution and not be held accountable, the Republicans said. This is not true. It does not establish that precedent. It simply means that Texas didn't have standing. Someone else could file this case. Someone who has standing could file this case, like I explained earlier. The injured party could file this case. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know who the best injured party would be, who the best plaintiff would be to file this case. But you could certainly file a case that against these unconstitutional rulings in the state of Pennsylvania or Wisconsin or Michigan or Georgia or Arizona, Nevada, any of these states. You certainly could, and I think eventually you would get a judge who would rule yes, it is constitutional, unconstitutional. And would overturn them. The thing is, I think it has to be done at the state level. I think this is a state matter from what I'm seeing and what I'm reading. So, I think if it's not in a state court, it's not going to have standing. Is what it looks like. So, but yeah, I mean, here we got the head of the GOP in Texas coming out and saying maybe some states should secede. Maybe we should essentially break away, form our own country that abides by the Constitution. And, on the surface, this sounds crazy. It's crazy times we live in, though. And I just want to talk a little bit about culturally why I think that we are going down this path where secession or, a civil war, not necessarily a violent civil war, but something like this, right? Like just seceding and people being pissed off at each other, an information war, kind of like that. Is possible. It's maybe on the road we're heading down, right? You got the left wing on the left, obviously, and you got the right wing. And, in order to have a country, you have to agree on basic fundamental things. You have to be culturally similar, right? And the Founding Fathers knew this. That's why they designed the country the way they did, with states having the power to do what they want and the federal government being really small. Because they knew that if the federal government got too powerful and tried to cram down laws on all the 50 states, America is a very culturally different place in parts of the country. Founding Fathers knew that if they tried to rule top down like that, it would just raise too many tensions. They would cram down too much stuff. People in California, making laws that affect people in Ohio doesn't make any sense. We're two completely different states. Culturally, we're completely different places. It would just lead to too much strife, too much butting of heads. So instead, the Founding Fathers said, okay, well, we got to have our own states. And we'll do the basic laws that everyone can agree upon in the Constitution and at the federal level, and everything else will be left to the states. And that'll keep everyone happy. That'll keep the union together. And it's a great concept. The Founding Fathers saw this because, they saw with the colonies and the British Empire. The British Empire was ruling top down. And the colonists, they said, we're way over here in America. We don't really live the same way you guys live in the British Empire, in the UK, what is now the UK. We don't live that way. We don't want to follow these laws. These laws are not good for us. We don't agree with these laws. So the Founding Fathers, they knew that. They had seen this happen. So they were smart enough to look ahead and see that it will happen again. History always repeats itself. But, culturally today, you've got one side, you've got the left and the right. And we agree on some things, but we disagree on so many fundamental things. And you would think that when you're talking to someone that you fundamentally disagree on, like, for example, I agree. I think, right to bear arms. Someone on the left thinks, oh, no, 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 your gun should be absolutely taken away. We have completely cultural differences, right? The left may be completely against religion and think that people in the red states, they may look down on people in the red states and think that people who live a religious life are perhaps, stuck in the dark ages or something like that, and that the left should just take control of that and just through law get rid of it. When you're talking to someone on the left and you're on the right, or vice versa, someone you disagree with, it kind of speaks for itself that maybe we should agree. If we disagree, if we have such large differences in our opinions, the Democrats, Republicans, left, right, whatever it may be, maybe we should agree. Maybe that's proof positive that we should agree that government should be small. Because I don't want the Democratic Party cramming down their cultural ideas through the federal government, and they don't want the Republican Party cramming down their ideas from the federal government. If we disagree so much on things, then that's a good argument that the federal government should be small so we can all kind of do what we want. But the problem is that over the last couple decades, the last few years especially, you've seen the Democrat Party go so far to the left that they want to grab power through the federal government, and they want to cram down what they believe is right, what they believe is culturally and socially correct. They want to cram it down on everyone else, no matter what it is. Hate speech, no guns, no religion, free speech. They want to get rid of all this stuff, right? And what you're seeing on the right, and the reason that I think this will eventually lead to some sort of secession or something like that, is that what you're seeing, the reaction on the right is that, I've had enough of this. I've had enough of them cramming this down. How about we just take the hammer and cram it down on them first? That's the inevitable pinnacle of this relationship, of this clash, of this conflict, of this cultural disagreements. Fundamentally, we do not agree with each other on fundamentals anymore in this country. The left does not agree with freedom of speech. They do not agree in individualism and the right to make your own decisions. You see it with this coronavirus. You see it, with the lockdowns. The left doesn't trust the average human to be smart enough to take care of themselves and to take care of their neighbor. The left thinks you need a law about wearing a mask. You don't. People on their own are smart enough. That's the difference. I mean, people on the right, they believe that the human, the individual, should have free will and the right to make his own decisions, and that if he is able to make his own decisions, majority of the time, those will be smart decisions. It's decisions in the interest of him, of himself, of oneself. A person will wear a mask. If there's a pandemic and, it looks like masks help, most people will wear masks, absent of a law. You don't need a law. And that's the difference between the left and the right. They just want to cram everything down. The left wants to just cram it down. They want to force churches and Catholic organizations, They want to force churches and Catholic organizations to provide health care for abortions and things that these Catholic organizations completely disagree with. It doesn't matter if you're religious or not. You should not be cramming down your ideology upon someone who does not agree. And it's so long as that happens, so long as ideological cram downs are happening from either side in this country, and they're happening mainly from the left, so long as they happen, though, we will always be on a path towards some sort of civil war or some sort of secession of states or breakup of the country or complete strife. People are not going to sit by. Half of the country is not going to sit by while the other half crams down their ideological beliefs upon them. They're not going to sit by and allow that to happen, to allow their entire way of life to be changed, transformed, and squashed by these people who don't live with them, who live in different states, different cities, think they're better than them, look down upon them. That is why the cultural divide, and it's not going to end with Biden. You heard the left talking about this a little bit under Trump. And now Biden's elected, and it's all about unity. We have to unify. We have to build back better, build back stronger. Unity, unity, unity. No, it's not going to end with Biden. There is no going back to normal. it will never go back to normal because we have a fundamental problem in this country that has not been addressed, a fundamental divide. All right, Brandon, enough about that. Sorry if it didn't make too much sense to you guys. I hope you got what I'm saying. It's a little bit of a, it's a hard topic to discuss. It's a hard topic to portray correctly. But I hope I did. We're going to be talking about this topic a lot over the next couple months, couple weeks, couple years, however long. We're going to be talking about it a lot because I think it's very important. I think it is going to be ever important and ever relevant to what we're going to see come from this country here soon. Let's go on. I just want to touch on this real quick. We saw, got an article here from BBC News. Joe Biden's son, Hunter, says he is under investigation over taxes. So I'm not going to read the article. I'm running a little over time. But essentially, we saw the New York Post leak this and Rudy Giuliani leak this quite a long time ago. We saw all these things about Burisma and how Hunter Biden was making a bunch of money off his family name, like $600,000 a year or something like that, right? Something absurd. We saw how reports of Hunter Biden flying around on Air Force Two when his dad was vice president, going to China, securing deals. We saw pictures of Joe Biden and Hunter Biden making deals with Kazakhstanis for large amounts of money, Kazakhstani businessmen, when Joe Biden was vice president. If you track Joe Biden's tax records, you can see that when he has been in office, the amount of money he makes, that it correlates directly to his time in office, which makes you think he's essentially selling his influence, or his family is selling his influence. You've seen some things about, Joe Biden's brother, James, I believe his name is, how he's, under investigation for defrauding some companies, some healthcare companies. You've seen all this. We've seen this. We've seen this evidence, and it's been suppressed by the media. But interestingly enough, a few days ago, Hunter Biden himself came out and he admitted that he is under investigation for his taxes. We've had one of his essentially business partners from Burisma come out and say, hey, yeah, Hunter Biden was hiding $400,000 in income from Burisma. I'm guessing that's what this investigation is about. We don't know yet. But, there are lots of unconfirmed reports. But we can't confirm any of those, obviously. By definition, they're unconfirmed. But, we're seeing this now. He himself is admitting it. And the FBI has said that they've been investigating Hunter for this as far back as 2018. So this whole time that, that the Biden was out there saying that Donald Trump was a Russian agent and, Donald Trump's taxes were bad, his son was under investigation for shady business deals with the Ukrainians. We're an arm of the Russians, essentially. With the Ukrainians, with Russians, with Chinese, with Kazakhstanis. And we're seeing that finally come out, and the media is barely covering it now. But I think what we're going to see from this, I hope what we're going to see from this in the next couple months, next couple weeks at this point, is that a special counsel will be appointed to investigate this. And a special counsel means that essentially they have to do their investigation and they cannot be fired by the president, right? I guess they technically can, but there's it would be political malpractice to fire a special counsel. That's why Donald Trump never fired Robert Mueller. It's extremely hard to fire a special counsel. They kind of operate on their own outside of government jurisdiction. But I hope we see a special counsel appointed before Donald Trump leaves office, because I believe that if we don't, that Joe Biden will definitely end the investigation into his son or pardon him or something like that. And you've been hearing from the left all these years that Donald Trump, upon leaving office, is going to pardon all the people in his administration. He's going to pardon Ivanka. He's going to pardon his son, Eric, and Don Jr. He's going to pardon them all for all their criminal activities. And he's never done it. He hasn't done it. He hasn't done any of that. Pardon Michael Flynn. Michael Flynn was caught on a BS crime. BS. But, yeah. So, I think in the next few weeks, we're going to see a special counsel appointed to investigate the Hunter Biden case. And if you think, and if, this is good, because I definitely think that Joe Biden will try to squash this, if not. And there's a possibility that even with a special counsel, Joe Biden will try to still squash it. I'm sure he will. He might even fire the special counsel. And the media, if they do that, the media will definitely run cover for him. But I mean, I just wanted to touch on it a little bit. We finally have direct proof. Of course, the mainstream media is not covering this, but I mean, it's utterly absurd. And let's look to see if this special counsel gets appointed. I hope it does. But that's all I got for you guys. The main things I wanted to touch on were earlier, the cultural stuff and the Texas lawsuit. And if you like what I'm saying, like, subscribe, share with the friends, share with the family, the coworkers, and yeah, you can listen to me on podcast too. I'm on all the providers, but like and subscribe on YouTube if you like the YouTube. And that's all I got for you guys. Thank you very much. Have a good one.